A woman tried to kick a man out of a private pool, convinced he was trespassing. What she didn't know was that he quietly owned every unit on the property, including hers. It happened on a hot Tuesday afternoon in Austin, Texas, the kind of heat that makes concrete shimmer and tempers short. Most residents at Willow Pines Apartments had retreated indoors, grateful for central air. But Celeste Granger, 61, wasn't one to stay idle. Her mornings were for volunteering, her afternoons for walking the property and keeping an eye on things. That's what she told herself anyway. Rules mattered to her. Who belonged, who didn't. And this afternoon, in her mind, something didn't look right. She had just stepped out of Building D, sunglasses on, wide-brimmed visor fixed neatly on her head, when she saw him. A tall black man sat at the poolside table, sipping from a reusable bottle and reading something thick, maybe a textbook or a finance journal. His clothes were clean, understated. Khaki shorts, navy polo, not flashy. But he wasn't familiar, and to Celeste that was enough of a red flag. She didn't hesitate. "Excuse me?" she called out as she walked briskly toward him. "Hi. Yes, you. Which unit are you visiting?" The man looked up, mildly surprised but not rattled. He closed his book and rested his hands on the table. "I'm not visiting anyone," he said evenly. Celeste stiffened. "This pool is for residents only. Guests need to be accompanied at all times. That's in the lease agreement." "I know," the man replied, still calm. "I'm not a guest." Celeste squinted at him. "Then who are you?" A pause. He didn't answer right away, and that made her even more suspicious. "I'm just spending some time here," he said. "Right," she huffed. "Well, I'm going to have to ask for your unit number. If you can't give it, I'll have to contact management. We've had incidents before, people sneaking in." He looked past her for a moment, not in disrespect, but almost as if deciding whether this moment was worth escalating. A light breeze rustled the nearby bushes, and the sound of a distant lawnmower buzzed in the background. "I don't live in any one unit," he said finally. "But I'm not trespassing." That did it. "You don't live here," she snapped. "Then you're not allowed to use this pool. I don't care what you think is okay. If you don't leave right now, I'll report this." By now, 2 residents on balconies were watching. Another woman, seated under the shade near the other end of the pool, lowered her sunglasses and leaned forward. "I'd really prefer not to make this a scene," the man said. Celeste crossed her arms. "You already did. I'll be back with security." She spun around, muttering to herself as she stormed off toward the office. But she only got 3 steps before the man's voice followed her. Not loud, not confrontational, just clear. "You might want to take a look at this before you go." Celeste turned slowly. He had pulled out his phone and opened an app, tapping quickly. Then he turned the screen to face her. There, on the digital portal of the HOA platform, was his name in bold type. Dr. Tavin Elridge, property owner, Willow Pines, LLC. Celeste stared at it for a beat too long. One of the residents from a balcony muttered, "Wait, what?" Another resident, a middle-aged man walking his dog along the path, slowed down, hearing the tension and catching a glimpse of the screen from a distance. Celeste tried to recover. "That doesn't mean you can just—" "Yes," Tevin said gently, standing now, still holding the phone up. "It does. I bought this complex 3 months ago. Quietly. I'm not one for announcements." She blinked hard. You own Willow Pines?" He nodded. "All 132 units." But Celeste wasn't the only one caught off guard. Other residents who had watched quietly were now looking at each other. Faces flushed, mouths slightly open, unsure what to say next. Dr. Tavin Elridge never liked fanfare. He preferred observing to announcing, listening over lecturing, though he'd spent 15 years in academia doing just that. Before stepping into the world of real estate development, he'd been a tenured professor of urban planning at the University of Arizona. His work focused on revitalizing neglected communities without erasing the people who already lived in them. Not the kind of man who bought properties to flip and sell. He studied people environments, power structures. And quietly, he worked to shift them. 3 months before the pool confrontation, he closed on Willow Pines in a low-key transaction. The place was aging but had character. Most units were still occupied by long-term tenants, working folks, retirees, single mums, couples in transition. The kind of community that still said hello in the parking lot, but didn't pry too much. Tavin didn't come with a clipboard or a parade of contractors. No polo shirts with embroidered logos. Just himself, a beat-up SUV, and quiet check-ins at different hours. He wanted to feel how the place breathed, who was up early, who walked their dog after dark, who waved, who didn't. He wasn't there to judge, just to understand. A week after buying the complex, he sat through a Friday evening board meeting incognito, not because he was hiding, but because he wanted to hear how residents talked about their lives when they didn't know who was listening. A few brought up concerns, maintenance delays, mail theft, a busted light near the laundry room that hadn't been fixed in months. The tone was polite, but weary. He noted every word. He met Carla, single mom, 3 kids, 2 jobs, who told the board she was worried her rent would go up under the new owner. He didn't speak that night, just listened, then quietly paid for repairs and instructed management to leave rent untouched for 6 months. People like Carla reminded him of his own mother, who raised 3 boys while working the front desk at a clinic in Tempe. She didn't complain much. She just kept moving. Tavin learned early that power wasn't in volume. It was in decisions. By the 2nd month, residents began noticing small changes. Repairs got handled faster. The trash area was cleaned up. New lights were installed without being requested. A few of the older tenants started to smile when they saw the maintenance guy drive in. But they didn't know who was behind it. And Tavin kept showing up, sometimes just to sit and read, other times to walk the parking lot at dusk and make mental notes. He wasn't spying. He just believed that showing up mattered. That ownership didn't mean separation, it meant responsibility. That Tuesday, he'd had no intention of being noticed. He just wanted 30 minutes of peace by the water, a rare break in his day. But when Celeste approached him, everything he'd worked to avoid, spotlight, confrontation, spectacle, landed right in his lap. Still, he didn't lose his cool. His mother once told him, "People don't always see what's in front of them, especially when it doesn't fit what they expect." That voice stayed with him as Celeste questioned him, accused him, almost called the cops. He could have raised his voice, matched her tone. But that wasn't who he was. He'd dealt with worse. In faculty meetings, in airports, even in boardrooms. Being mistaken for security at his own conference wasn't new. Having to flash credentials just to be taken seriously was part of his rhythm. He hated it, but he'd mastered the art of choosing his battles. So when she threatened to call security, he didn't flinch. He pulled out his phone. Let the truth do the talking. But revealing the truth wasn't the end. It was only the spark that lit something deeper across Willow Pines. By the time Celeste's voice had turned sharp enough to draw attention, 6 people were watching from balconies, windows, and lawn chairs. A few wore the usual expressions of detached curiosity, the kind people put on when they're unsure whether to step in or keep sipping their drinks. But the tension didn't sit easy. One of them was Raymond Deakins, 74, retired trucker from Amarillo. He'd lived at Willow Pines for 9 years and knew just about everyone by face, if not by name. He leaned over his 2nd-floor balcony, arms resting on the chipped wood rail, eyes squinting at the pool deck below. "Celeste always got her nose in somebody else's business," he muttered to himself, nudging his wife behind him. "But she picked the wrong one today." Down below, Veronica Chase, a 38-year-old nurse, had been reading on a lounge chair. She caught the entire exchange from the beginning. Celeste's bark, the man's calm, the phone reveal, and now sat still, legs tucked under her, book forgotten in her lap. Tavin stood, not in a show of dominance, but with the grace of someone who understood the moment had shifted. Celeste, though rattled, tried to recover. "Well, no one told us anything. Management should have sent out a notice," she said, glancing nervously at the onlookers. "How were we supposed to know?" He gave a faint smile. "You weren't, but that doesn't excuse assumptions." From the balcony, Raymond chuckled under his breath. He got her. A younger couple, Miguel and Tessa Rojas, stood near the gate with their toddler in a stroller. They weren't close enough to hear every word, but the tone said enough. Miguel shook his head. "I've seen that woman stop a pizza guy before," he whispered to Tessa. "Wouldn't let him through without checking the box." Celeste looked around, realizing the pool had become a stage. She tried to shift the focus. "I'm just saying, if people had been informed, maybe there wouldn't have been this misunderstanding." Tavin didn't move. His voice was still level. "You didn't ask. You assumed. There's a difference." That landed hard. Even those who might have sided with her early on were quiet now, not because they feared him, but because they recognized what they'd just witnessed. A snap judgment, made loudly, in public, and corrected without force. Veronica stood up and walked over, book in hand. "You okay?" she asked Tavin. "I am," he replied. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he nodded. "Thank you." Celeste opened her mouth again, then stopped. Her eyes bounced between the screen in his hand and the silent witnesses surrounding them. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what she'd revealed in herself. Another tenant, Lonnie Graves, a soft-spoken widower who often fed stray cats behind the maintenance shed, walked by, nodded to Tavin, and kept going. That gesture said more than words. Tavin could feel the atmosphere start to shift. Not dramatically, but enough. The tension didn't disappear. It stretched, changed shape, took on weight. He pocketed his phone, looked at Celeste, and said, "I don't need you to apologize. I just hope you think about this." She didn't reply. Just stood there, lips pressed together, one hand clutching the strap of her purse. Then, almost as if on cue, the maintenance golf cart whirred into view. Behind the wheel was Sandra Wu, the property's longest employed worker. She slowed, eyes darting between Tavin and Celeste. Tavin gave her a small wave. She smiled back, clearly knowing more than most. "Everything good here?" Sandra asked, stopping beside them. Tavin answered, "Yeah, just a conversation." Celeste looked away. But what began as a small incident at the pool had turned into something harder to ignore. A mirror held up to everyone watching. Sandra remained parked in her little maintenance cart, her presence adding a final note of credibility to Tavin's words. She knew him, not well, not personally, but she'd been informed weeks ago who the new owner was, and she respected him. He didn't bark orders, didn't hover or micromanage. He made his expectations clear in writing and let her do her job. That alone was rare. Celeste, meanwhile, had lost the control she was used to wielding. Her shoulders hunched slightly as she adjusted the strap on her purse again, shifting her weight between her feet, eyes darting from Sandra to Tavin and back. It was obvious now she was trying to find a way out, a way to rewrite the story without having to say the hard part out loud. But it was too late. "I didn't mean any harm," she said finally, though her voice lacked its usual bite. I'm protective of this place." Tavin didn't interrupt. He let the words settle. "You've been here a long time, I take it?" he asked. 13 years, she said, standing a little straighter now. "And I've always looked out for the rules." "I respect that," he said. "But protecting a community doesn't mean policing the people who don't look familiar. It means being open enough to ask, not accuse." Her jaw tightened, just for a moment, but she swallowed whatever comeback she had. From the balcony above, Raymond Deakins called out, "Man's got a point, Celeste. Maybe time we all did less assuming." She flinched, caught between defensiveness and embarrassment. Tavin didn't press her further. He simply looked at the others, Veronica, the Rojases, even Sandra, and offered a nod of acknowledgement. "Look," he said, addressing the small crowd now. "I didn't come here today looking for a scene. I was just trying to enjoy a quiet moment." Miguel, still standing near the gate, raised his hand slightly. "Man, you handled that better than most would have." Veronica chimed in. If I were you, I'd be furious. I've been angry before, Tavin said, turning back to her. But I've learned that anger burns fast, and sometimes people remember your reaction more than their own actions. There was a beat of silence. No one argued with that. Sandra finally broke it. You want me to bring anything by your unit later, Mr. Elridge? Paperwork? Maintenance reports? He shook his head. Not today. Just enjoying the place like anyone else. Celeste shifted again. Well, you could have said something sooner. About owning the place. He met her eyes. I didn't think I needed to. That hit harder than anything he'd said before. It was subtle, but clear. He didn't owe her an explanation, and yet he gave her one anyway. With dignity. A few more residents had wandered into the area now, catching wind of the scene or the story behind it. One young man walking his dog asked quietly, Wait, that's the new owner. Raymond, still up on his balcony, laughed out loud. Yep. And Celeste just tried to kick him out the pool. It wasn't cruel, but it was enough to make her wince. Tavin, however, lifted his hand slightly. Let's not turn this into a spectacle, he said. His restraint only deepened the impact. I don't want people looking at her sideways next week. That's not what this is about. I just want folks to think twice before deciding who belongs and who doesn't. Tessa Rojas, holding her baby now, nodded slowly. That's fair. Really fair. Sandra gave Tavin a quiet thumbs up before driving away in her cart. Celeste remained still, quiet now, her mouth in a thin line. She wasn't ready to apologize. Maybe she wouldn't ever. But something had cracked. And for Tavin, that was enough for now. But this wasn't just about one afternoon. It was about the stories people carried into every interaction, and whether they were ever brave enough to rewrite them. The pool area slowly cleared, but the moment stayed. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew something had shifted. It wasn't just about Celeste, or Tavin. It was about the quiet way people sorted others in their heads, without knowing, without asking. Tavin had done nothing extraordinary. He didn't yell. He didn't shame. He simply revealed the truth, and let it sit in the space between them. That night, word spread through willow pines like steam from a kettle. By the next morning, it had traveled further than the splash from a rock in water ever could. At Building C, Carla, the single mum who'd worried about her rent, was telling her neighbor what had happened at the pool. She tried to throw him out like he was nobody. And turns out, he owns the place. I mean, owns it. In Building A, Raymond was still talking, handled himself like a man raised right. Didn't bark back, didn't try to humiliate her. That's rare these days. And in her unit, Celeste sat by her kitchen window, stirring lukewarm tea that had long gone cold. The TV was on, volume low, but her thoughts weren't there. They were stuck back at the pool, looping his words in her head. You didn't ask. You assumed. There's a difference. She kept replaying how calm he was. Not smug, not angry, just still. It unsettled her. Not because she thought she was wrong, but because she realized she hadn't thought at all. She'd seen a man sitting where she didn't expect him to be, and jumped straight into judgment without a second breath. The next morning, Tavin returned, not to check on her, not to stir things up, but to meet with Sandra and the maintenance crew for a walk-through. Still, people watched him a little differently. Not with fear, not with suspicion, but with attention. In the parking lot, Miguel greeted him with a smile that wasn't forced this time. You good? He asked. Tavin nodded. Always. Miguel hesitated. I meant what I said yesterday. You handled that. Better than I could have. You don't always get to pick the battles, Tavin replied. But you can pick how you carry yourself through them. Miguel nodded slowly. Respect, man. Later that week, Veronica passed Tavin near the mailbox. She looked like she had something to say, then stopped herself. You know, she finally blurted, my brother runs a building in San Antonio. Been trying to keep it affordable, but it's hard. He could use someone to talk to, someone who's doing it. Tavin paused. I'd be happy to connect. She smiled, relaxed now. You might be the first landlord I've ever said that to. Not everyone spoke. Some kept their distance, unsure if they were part of the problem. Some probably were. But even the silent ones walked a little slower past him now, less like he was invisible, more like they saw him with new eyes. And then, there was Celeste. 4 days after the pool incident, she walked by while he was at the leasing office, signing off on paperwork. She stopped, not expecting to see him. He looked up, met her eyes. She hesitated, then walked over. "I wasn't raised to speak without thinking," she said. "But lately, I think I forgot that." Tavin studied her for a moment. "People forget all kinds of things," he said. "What matters is what they choose to remember next time." She lowered her gaze. "I won't forget this one." He nodded once. No handshake, no forced reconciliation, just a pause between them that said everything that needed saying. But growth isn't loud. It doesn't wear a badge or demand applause. Sometimes it just sits quietly beside humility and waits to be noticed. A week passed, then 2. The story didn't vanish, but it softened. Like a sharp corner worn down by touch. People still talked about it, but the energy around it changed. It wasn't gossip anymore. It had become reference, quiet reflection. Tavin returned to Willow Pines several times in those weeks, not to supervise or monitor, but to sit, like he always had. Sometimes near the small community garden, other times near the dog park. And yes, again at the pool. Each time someone would stop to chat. Veronica made a habit of bringing him her extra lemon bars from the hospital cafeteria. "They're terrible," she admitted, handing one over. "But I figured you deserved one." "Appreciated," he smiled, accepting it anyway. Even Raymond, with his gruff charm, started greeting Tavin by name. "Still own the place, huh?" "Still do." "Well, don't start charging for balcony access. I got prime real estate up here." It wasn't that everything had changed overnight. There were still whispers, still the occasional uncomfortable silence when new tenants moved in and some old habits crept up. But there was awareness now. People caught themselves sooner, looked a little longer before assuming. And then there was Celeste. She didn't apologize again. But one morning, she left a small envelope at the office with Tavin's name on it. Inside was a handwritten note. Short, neat cursive. "I judged you unfairly. I'm working on that." Below that, no name. Just a line that read, "This place matters to me, and I can do better." He kept the note. The next time he saw her, it was near the mailboxes. She gave a nod. Small, unsure, but genuine. He returned it. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied. That was it. Tavin didn't need more. He knew change didn't always come with confetti. Sometimes it just looked like someone stopping to think twice before speaking. The community responded to his quiet leadership in small ways. At the next tenant meeting, residents raised their hands more. A few new faces showed up. People started asking better questions. Even the tone shifted. Less complaint, more conversation. He'd never intended to be a hero, just a landlord who cared. But sometimes care becomes a mirror, and when people see themselves in it, they can't always look away. Sandra, the maintenance lead, noticed it too. As they walked the property one morning, she said, "It's funny, you didn't say much that day, but it landed harder than if you'd yelled." "People hear what they're ready for," he replied. "Still," she said, "you handled it the right way." Tavin paused. "I don't think there's one right way. I just did what felt honest, and that was the truth." He wasn't interested in winning battles. He was interested in shaping a place where people could live with a little more grace, a little more dignity, no matter what they looked like, or where they came from. Willow Pines wasn't perfect, but it was changing, slowly, like a door creaking open after being stuck too long, and all it took was one afternoon, one man who refused to be provoked, one moment where truth mattered more than pride. But sometimes real change doesn't come from the people yelling the loudest. It comes from the ones who speak softly and are finally heard. 2 months after that summer afternoon, a new family moved into Unit 107, a mother, a teenage son, and a dog that barked at everything. No one questioned them. No one cornered them at the mailbox or interrogated them by the pool. A few neighbors even dropped off small welcome gifts, a potted plant, a handwritten note, a list of local takeout spots. Tavin noticed. Not because he expected credit, but because it confirmed what he already knew. When people are given the chance to grow, some take it. He sat at the pool again one evening, legs crossed at the ankle, a notebook resting on his knee. He didn't bring his laptop anymore, just pen and paper. Across the courtyard he saw Veronica waving to Celeste. It wasn't a big gesture, but they hadn't spoken much before. Celeste, in her usual visor and sandals, gave a small wave back. Tavin smiled. Truth be told, he didn't enjoy being recognized. He liked being the guy nobody noticed. But that wasn't possible here anymore. Still, he handled it the same way he handled everything else. Without flash, without expectation. Raymond came down from his perch and eased himself onto the pool bench beside Tavin with an exaggerated grunt. "You know," Raymond said, "this place feels different lately." Tavin glanced over. "In a good way?" "In a real way," Raymond replied. "Folks thinking before they talk. Not everyone. But enough." Tavin closed his notebook. "Sometimes that's all it takes." They sat in silence for a bit, just the hum of cicadas filling the background and the soft clink of a pool skimmer in the water. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. "People used to think quiet meant weakness," Raymond said after a while. "But I think, quiet just means control," Tavin chuckled. "Depends on the quiet." Raymond gave a slow nod. "Well, yours ain't the kind that comes from fear. It's the kind that makes people listen harder." That stuck with Tavin. Not because he needed validation, but because it reminded him why he chose to do things differently. His mother didn't raise him to win arguments. She raised him to build spaces where arguments didn't have to happen in the first place. That's what Willow Pines was becoming. Not because of policy, not because of fear, but because the people in it, one by one, started adjusting their focus. It hadn't been dramatic, just intentional. Celeste still walked the grounds in the afternoons. She still straightened things that didn't need straightening. But now, when she passed someone unfamiliar, she asked before assuming. That alone was a kind of victory. Veronica began hosting little book swaps on Saturdays. Raymond offered to teach kids how to ride their bikes safely around the complex. Miguel and Tessa started a group chat for residents to report small issues or share extra groceries. Tavin never asked for any of it. They just started. The shift wasn't about race or ownership or power. It was about being seen, truly seen, and about how fast people stop seeing when they start labeling instead. Tavin didn't need applause. He didn't need a plaque in the leasing office. All he ever wanted was for the space he owned to reflect the values he carried: care, presence, accountability, and the kind of respect that doesn't come from fear, but from truth. As the sun dropped low and the cicadas quieted, he stood, slid the notebook into his bag, and took one last look around the pool, not to admire it, but to check. Were the chairs clean? Was the gate working? Were the people here at ease? They were. He turned and walked back to his car. Because sometimes the biggest statement a person can make is leaving things better than they found them, without ever saying a word. Moral of the story: everyday assumptions can cause quiet harm. But the way we respond, especially when we're underestimated, can reshape not just perceptions, but entire communities. You don't have to shout to make a difference. Sometimes, truth and patience speak louder than anything. If this story moved you, consider subscribing. There are more true-to-life stories on the way, stories that remind us that character isn't what you show when people are watching. It's what you choose when they're not.